Hello, I'm John Macario, Senior Vice President for Channel and Enterprise Marketing at Ribbon Communications. First off, let me say thank you to the good folks at UC Today who have invited us to participate in this UC Summit. Wish we were sitting all together, seeing each other face to face, but we'll do the best we can. I want to do a couple of things with my keynote session today. First off, I want to tell you a little bit about Ribbon. I won't go into a lot of details, but some people are not terribly familiar with Ribbon and our brand and what we do, so I'll spend really no more than 3 minutes on that. For the bulk of the presentation, what I really want to do is to show you some results from a global research study that we are in the middle of right now. We've collected data in the Americas and Europe on a number of interesting items for folks in the UC business. So I'm going to share that data with you, tell you what we think the conclusions of that are and why it's important to you as sellers and or buyers in the UC market. You can see I've subtitled this, There's Something Happening in the SME Market, and it's something that's going to be very good for all of us. So we'll get into the details. So first off, a little bit about Ribbon, our heritage and solutions. Ribbon is a company that is global in scope. We have customers in 140 companies, revenue just under $1 billion, 3,700 employees, and we have market leadership positions not only in the session border controller market, but a number of other important areas in the communications infrastructure space as well. Ribbon's been built over the years through acquisition. Certainly many folks in this audience are going to recognize some of the names on this chart. Nortel Networks started back in 1967, Genband, Sonus, Edgewater Networks, Inova Data, an analytics company that Ribbon acquired in 2015. And most recently, we acquired ECI in March of 2020, an optical transport and packet networking company. It's really broadened what we do. Legacy Ribbon, if you'd like to call it that, made up of the companies that you see on top, was focused on voice infrastructure. ECI, data networking. So now we've got a very complete portfolio of products. Right. Our cloud and edge business unit, the voice infrastructure part of it, you can see across the top the product areas that we cover. What's important to note here is our customers are both service providers and enterprises. On the service provider side, many recognizable names in there from very large companies like AT&T or British Telecom, Orange, down to smaller regional players around the world. On the enterprise side, we have very strong legacy in financial services, government, healthcare solutions, higher education, and many other markets as well. On the IP Optical Networks business unit, we've got really a couple of elements. We've got optical networking with our Apollo set of solutions, our Neptune solutions for packet solutions, and finally, both of them are controlled and orchestrated by our Muse orchestration engine. If any of you are interested in learning either about the cloud and edge side or the IP optical network side of the business, please do stop by our virtual booth and we'll have staff there who can answer questions and lots of great resources. All right, on to the real meat of the presentation. We call it Ribbon UC Perspectives. We've been out in the market with our partners, talking to them about this data and what it means to their business. Today at the UC Summit is the first general public unveiling of this data. So we're proud to be here and hope you'll find this interesting. So what did we do? We did an online survey of about 4,500 technology decision makers in 18 countries, in the Americas and in Europe. We conducted this survey in November of 2020. We finished analyzing the results about a month ago. The respondents worked in companies with as few as 5 employees, as many as 5,000 and more employees. And we asked them several questions about these topic areas. We wanted to understand how these companies use their infrastructure today. Who are they buying what services from? How are they managing IT? And how do they see their infrastructure evolving? Secondly, we asked a lot of questions about unified communications and UCaaS, Unified Communications as a Service. Series of questions on Microsoft Teams. And then finally, and topically, we asked some questions about their COVID-19 response. What went right? What went wrong when 80% of their workers were remote? And how are they coping with this over the long haul? I'm going to share some data with you from each one of these sections. So first, let's look at unified communications, and I've got an infrastructure question right at the top. One of the questions we asked was, how does your business manage IT? Do you use an IT manager, meaning a single person, an IT staff, more than one person? Do you have someone in-house who does this as a part-time job? Do you use a third party, a managed service provider, for example? Or do you simply not manage IT? Excuse me. The chart that you see up in the upper left-hand corner is data taken from the same study done in April 2019. And one of the things I've always found interesting is that 18% of these respondents just say, we don't manage IT. We have no need. If something breaks, we go and get it fixed or try and find somebody to fix it for us. In November of 2020, the picture looks a lot different. Only 4% of the respondents said that they didn't manage IT. Further, in April of 2019, a third of the companies, only a third of the companies, had a full-time on-site IT presence. By November 2020, that number jumped up to 54%. That's a really large increase, not quite a 2x increase, but right up there in the span of 18 months, right? What happened? Well, what we think happened is small businesses recognizing that they now needed to support home workers, all of a sudden recognized they didn't have the technology in place to do it. They didn't have the people in place who knew how to do it. So they went out and got them. They hired them and are now working in those businesses, bringing their IT infrastructure up to date. As you go up to larger size companies, and I apologize, my picture is going to cover a little bit of this. As you go up to larger size companies, obviously IT staffs begin to dominate more and more. Right? Totally sensible. Here's the takeaway though. When you're talking to a decision maker in a 100-person business, a 50-person business, in the past, you only really had a 33% chance that you were going to be talking to someone with an IT background. More likely, you're talking to the business owner or a partner in the business, someone like that. These days, we've got more of an IT presence. My feeling is that unified communications companies, people who sell UC services, have traditionally done a really good job selling above 100 employees into the thousands, true enterprise accounts, because it's technical people talking to technical people. In the past, if you're trying to sell in that SME market, you're talking tech language to a business owner who probably is not tech savvy. Makes it a really hard conversation. So there's been a big change. Now you're more likely to find a 100-person business with an IT person on staff full time than not. And what that's resulted in is an increase in the adoption of unified communications. So we asked these 4,500 decision makers, what type of phone service does your business have? If they told us that they had an IP PBX, managed or unmanaged, unified communications as a service, or a combination of the two, we classified them as UC adopters, the sort of pink color that you see in the upper part of the bars. If they told us that they had anything else, a legacy TDM PBX, a key system, only bought business lines, they had no need for a phone system, those are the folks in purple. And you can see from this chart pretty clearly, the larger the company, the more likely they were to have adopted unified communications. But here's the thing, taking into account what I said on the last slide, when we compare this data to what we saw in April of 2019, that 1 to 100 segment adoption is up 41% from that 2019 study. In the 100 to 1,000, it's up 22% from the 2019 study. It's been flat, low single-digit growth in the true enterprise space. So something is happening down here in this 1 to 1,000 range that can only be positive. Second takeaway from this chart, there's a lot of purple on it. For anyone out there who thinks the unified communications market is, quote, mature, well, you've got 75% of the SMB market still haven't adopted. 2/3 of the 100 to 1,000 market have yet to adopt. there's a lot of room for us out there who are in the UC business. And then finally, we asked the respondents who had not adopted yet, so the folks in purple, how interested they were in unified communications and when they thought their company might adopt. And here are the results. These first bars are the percentage of respondents who were non-adopters who said that they were either interested, very interested, or extremely interested in UC. These are great numbers. I mean, 85 to 97% interest. When we asked, when do you think you'd buy? Now, within 6 months, within a year, within 2 years, or longer? Here are the percentages of the non-adopters who told us they felt their company would switch from what they have today to unified communications within 2 years. So about 2/3, approaching 70%. Really good news. A market that's underpenetrated, a low end of the market that's now become much more tech savvy, and a lot of interest and propensity to buy over the next 2 years. Let's hope that means wins for all of us. A few words about Microsoft Teams. So again, we did our study last year and asked, what are your company's plans for Microsoft Teams? Starting from the bottom, the light blue color is we're unaware of Microsoft Teams. We don't know what that is. The red is we know what Microsoft Teams is. We're just not going to use it in our business. The 14% in the yellow are the group that are planning to deploy or were planning to deploy in April of 2019. The 16% in purple are the number who were in the process of deploying in April 2019. And then the dark color at the top were those who had already deployed in April 2019. We got a very different answer in 2020, right? You can see awareness or unawareness, I should say, went from 46% down to 15%, a lot more yellow, that's planning, purple, deploying, and gray, deployed. In fact, what we've seen is 103% increase from April 2019 to November 2020. Similar, but not as dramatic increases between 2019 and late 2020 in the 100 to 1,000 employee space. That works out to be an 11% increase. And for the largest companies in our study, again, an increase this time of about 36%. Everybody's talking about Teams Direct Routing. Everybody's talking about the number of daily active users in Teams, right? This stuff is for real. And if you're not playing in the Teams Direct Routing market, I suggest you come and visit our virtual booth. We can tell you a lot more about it and show you how you as a UCaaS provider can participate in the dramatic market growth that's going on with Teams. Some companies are using Teams in different ways. Right? Some are using it merely as a collaboration tool. They can collaborate through interactive sessions, share desktops, and so on with people inside and outside their companies. There's another group who are actually building calling or planning to build calling into Teams, connecting Microsoft Teams with their current service provider and an existing premise-based PBX, or their existing service provider and their cloud PBX provider. Right? Those companies, in addition to being able to do all the collaboration activities, can actually receive inbound phone calls and make outbound phone calls through the Microsoft Teams interface. And finally, Microsoft, as many of you probably know, do have dialing plans, dial tone. They can become a service provider to you in a number of geographies, I think about 16 countries at the moment. And they do have a feature set in what they call Microsoft Phone System. So some of these companies are jumping straight to Microsoft as their provider of dial tone and as a provider of their feature set. The last group of small bars on the right are, we're not sure what we're doing yet. In the long term, the question was, do you plan to, for those who are using Teams for voice calling, do you plan on staying on your legacy system, fully migrate to phone system, or partially migrate to phone system? You can see that the majority, about 60%, generally speaking, are planning to stay on their legacy system. That's called Teams Direct Routing. For Teams Direct Routing, you can keep your existing SIP trunking provider, switch the trunks over, and you can use Teams for collaboration and calling, but Microsoft requires that there's a session border controller between you and the Teams cloud. And quick commercial, Ribbon has the largest portfolio of Microsoft certified session border controllers for Teams Direct Routing. If you'd like to know more, please do come to our booth. And we're really pleased to announce that about a week or two ago, we GA'd our as a service model for Teams Direct Routing. It's called Ribbon Connect for Teams Direct Routing. If you want to learn more, again, pop over to our virtual booth and have a look. It's going to be a great solution, whether you're selling to the SME market or you're a medium or large business. Ribbon Connect gives you a way to get up quickly and easily without buying any hardware, without buying any software, and to do it on a consumption-based basis. So for those who said they were going to go to phone system and calling plans, we asked them why. The number one response was they really wanted an integrated Microsoft solution. Second most and third most important reasons was it made the most economic sense for their business. It was future-proof. They had Microsoft licenses. For those who were not going to go to phone system and calling plans, we're going to stay on their legacy system. Right? We asked why. About a quarter of them said they were uncertain about Microsoft's long-term plans. Some said that they thought the price of the Microsoft calling plans was too high, weren't available in all markets, and larger companies in particular felt that phone system as it exists today lacked some of the features like contact center that were very important to their business. So a lot going on in the Teams market. So let me finish up now talking about the questions that we asked for COVID-19, right? Everybody keeps talking about the new normal. I don't know what that is anymore, but we've got some insight into both what happened and how companies responded to the pandemic and remote workers, and what they're thinking is the right thing to do post-pandemic, which hopefully comes soon. So the first question we asked was, how well prepared was your company to support remote workers during the pandemic? Yellow is that they were well prepared. The red is somewhat prepared, and the blue is poorly prepared. So I can read this chart a number of ways. If I look at the small and medium businesses, I've got 2/3 who said they were only somewhat or poorly prepared. 56% of the 100 to 1,000s said that they were only somewhat or poorly prepared, and even the largest companies, a majority, 51%, were only somewhat or poorly prepared. People are taking this seriously. We talked about UC growth rates. I think that's important. We talked about the proliferation of Microsoft Teams. I think these become lessons learned during the pandemic. We asked how severely their company's communications infrastructure was impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. You can see the results. About 1/3 of companies are reporting to us that it was greatly impacted, and another 1/3 said it was moderately impacted. So 2/3 across the board here are telling us that their communications infrastructure was either moderately or greatly impacted. And as a representative of Ribbon, I can vouch for that. In late February, early March, our communication service provider customers, our larger enterprise customers, were coming to us in droves, trying to increase the capacity of their voice networks. And I'm very pleased to say we were able to help them. So this chart builds and is in response to the question, before, during, and after the pandemic, what percentage of your employees worked remotely? 64% of the smallest companies before the pandemic said that only 25% or fewer of their employees worked remotely. Much smaller numbers saying 25 to 50%, 50 to 75, and greater than 75. During the pandemic, obviously, this shifted dramatically. The number was cut in half of the less than 25%. Everybody was working remotely. As you can see, I'm still working remotely. After the pandemic, what were their plans? What did they think was going to happen? Right? The number goes back up, but about 31% say that more than 25% of their workers will be working remotely after the pandemic. For the 100 to 1,000s, I'll just build this out. Similar pattern, 60%, less than 25% working remotely, went down to 21% during the pandemic. And altogether, when you put it together, there's a 35% increase in these companies who feel that they're going to have more than 25% of their teams working remotely post-pandemic. And for the largest of enterprises, it's about a 36% increase. This is really consistent with a lot of what we've heard from other analysts' reports. They're expecting about 30 to 35% of their work of a company's workers to continue working remotely post-pandemic. And finally, we asked this question: what collaboration tools did you use to support remote workers during the COVID-19 pandemic? These are arrayed from highest average to lowest average. So Microsoft Teams, top of the charts. Among the smallest businesses, the blue bars, Zoom was more popular than Teams, but not by much. Skype for Business, for those still using it, that's going to be out of support pretty soon. People are going to migrate to something new. Maybe it'll be Teams, maybe it'll be Zoom, we'll see. But what strikes me on this chart is the big drop off after those top three. After Microsoft and Zoom, you got WebEx at about 9% on average, GoToMeeting 8% on average, Slack down in the 3 to 4% range, BlueJeans about 2 or 3%. The next category is Other, that was about 2% as well. And then the final category that you can't see because my big head is in the way was Avaya, and that was down in the 1% range. So striking and dramatic, right? This is the way business is going, and I think all of us in the UC business need to recognize, as my colleague Greg Zweig has said, all of a sudden, a month into the pandemic, CIOs found out that they remarkably had 80% of their workers trained on a new UC platform, and from this chart, that was either Teams or Zoom, right? They're thinking about how to integrate calling into those collaboration solutions. Zoom does it through something called Zoom Phone. Once again, Ribbon has a big, broad portfolio of session border controllers that are certified for Zoom Phone. They're doing it through Microsoft Teams. And recently, WebEx is announcing that calling to the PSTN will be integrated into Cisco WebEx. So I want to thank all of you for spending time with me today. Again, I wish we could be there in person and I could be taking your questions, but please do feel free to come over to the booth. If you are a current Ribbon partner, please reach out to your Ribbon partner account manager if you'd like to see more of this data or take a deeper dive. If you're an enterprise customer and want to learn more, please reach out to channelmarketing@rbbn.com and we can help you out. Thanks very much. Have a great event.